When Olivia Bennett inherited a dilapidated grain silo from her late uncle's farm in the rural town of Maplewood, it seemed like a cruel joke for a single mother struggling to make ends meet after losing her job as a structural engineer and facing foreclosure on her modest home. She never imagined that beneath layers of rust and decades of neglect, she would discover a fully equipped FBI Cold War nuclear bunker containing classified emergency response protocols and advanced communication systems that had been forgotten by time. This unexpected inheritance would transform her from a woman on the brink of financial ruin into the unlikely hero who saved her entire community when a devastating wildfire threatened to destroy everything in its path, ultimately reshaping emergency response systems across rural America and proving that sometimes our greatest blessings come disguised as misfortunes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The notice arrived on a stormy Tuesday morning, wedged between a past-due electricity bill and a college recruitment flyer addressed to resident, as if its life-altering contents were nothing more than everyday mail. Foreclosure notice, 30 days to vacate. Olivia Bennett stood frozen in her kitchen, the paper trembling in her hands as rain lashed against the windows of the small ranch house she had fought so hard to keep. Through the archway to the living room, she could hear her 10-year-old daughter Zoe humming softly while sketching in her notebook, blissfully unaware that their world was crumbling around them. Again, "No, please no," Olivia whispered, scanning the document desperately for any loophole or extension possibility. There wasn't one. The bank was reclaiming the property after 6 months of missed payments that had become impossible after Western Bridge Engineering laid off their entire regional division. Her emergency fund had been depleted by an emergency appendectomy 3 months prior. Her job search had yielded nothing but automated rejection emails and ghosted applications. At 36, Olivia hadn't imagined she would be here, a single mother. With a master's degree in structural engineering and 15 years of professional experience, now facing homelessness in a rural town where affordable housing was virtually non-existent. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had designed bridges and buildings that would stand for generations, yet couldn't keep a roof over her own daughter's head. "Mom, look at this building I designed." Zoe called from the living room, her voice bright with the uncomplicated enthusiasm of childhood. Olivia quickly tucked the foreclosure notice into her pocket and forced a smile before joining her daughter. "That's incredible, sweetheart," she said, admiring the intricate drawing of a circular tower with various levels and glass dome ceilings. Zoe had inherited her mother's eye for structural design, showing remarkable talent for spatial relationships and architectural concepts that amazed her teachers. "It's a community center where people can grow food inside all year round," Zoe explained, pointing to different sections of her design. "See, these are vertical gardens, and this part collects rainwater. And these solar panels power everything." Olivia's throat tightened with emotion. Zoe had always been concerned about people who didn't have enough food or safe places to live. Now they would be joining those ranks themselves. "When I grow up, I want to design buildings that help people," Zoe continued, adding details to her drawing. "Like places where everybody can have enough food and be warm, even if they don't have a lot of money." That night, after Zoe had fallen asleep, Olivia sat at the kitchen table with her laptop, the foreclosure notice laid out beside her like a death sentence. She began searching for rental properties in Maplewood and the surrounding areas, but the options were bleak. The few available rentals were either far beyond her limited unemployment benefits or so rundown they would barely pass safety inspections. She expanded her search radius, looking at towns up to 50 miles away, places that would mean pulling Zoe from her school and friends, places with even fewer job prospects for a specialized structural engineer. Each option seemed worse than the last. By midnight, Desperation had driven her to check her email one more time before bed. Among the job rejection notices was a message from a law firm she didn't recognize. Urgent. Estate of Robert Bennett. Notification of inheritance. Olivia stared at the subject line in confusion. Uncle Robert? Her father's eccentric brother, who had cut ties with the family decades ago. The man who had disappeared into the rural heartland to become a farmer after a mysterious career change. In the 1980s? The uncle she hadn't seen since she was 7 years old. She opened the email with shaking hands. Dear Ms. Bennett, our firm represents the estate of the late Robert Bennett. We regret to inform you of Mr. Bennett's passing on April 12th. As his sole surviving relative, you have inherited his property in Clearwater County, consisting of 40 acres of farmland and associated structures. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange the transfer of ownership. Sincerely, Margaret Wilson & Associates, attorneys at law. Olivia read the message 3 times, trying to process its meaning. Uncle Robert was dead, and he had left her his farm. The timing was so surreal it felt almost orchestrated, as if the universe had decided to throw her a lifeline at the exact moment she was drowning. Sleep was impossible now. She spent the next hours researching Clearwater County property records, finding her uncle's farm about 75 miles from Maplewood. The satellite images showed a modest farmhouse, several outbuildings, and what appeared to be an old grain silo standing alone in a field. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Property tax records indicated the land was valued just under $200,000, not a fortune, but potentially enough to provide a fresh start if she sold it. Or possibly a place they could live while she figured out their next steps. By morning, Olivia had formulated a plan. She called the law firm as soon as their office opened, speaking with Margaret Wilson herself, a no-nonsense attorney who explained that Robert Bennett had specified in his will that Olivia was to inherit everything. Your uncle was a very private man, Ms. Wilson explained. He kept to himself, paid his taxes on time, and seemed to live quite frugally despite owning the property outright. The farmhouse is, well, it's been neglected in recent years as his health declined. But the land itself has value. Did he leave anything else? Olivia asked. Any personal messages or letters? Just one note with the will, Ms. Wilson replied. It said, Olivia will know what to do with it. The answers are in the silo. Does that mean anything to you? The silo? Olivia repeated, remembering the cylindrical structure she'd spotted in the satellite images. Not really, I barely knew him. They arranged to meet the following day at the property to complete the preliminary paperwork and give Olivia access to her inheritance. That evening, she sat Zoe down to explain the unexpected development. Remember when I told you about my Uncle Robert? The one who lived on a farm? Zoe nodded. The mystery uncle who sent me that cool geology kit for my birthday 2 years ago. Olivia had forgotten about that, a package that had arrived with no return address, containing professional-grade rock samples and scientific instruments, far more advanced than typical children's toys. That's right. Well, he's passed away, sweetie. And it turns out he left us his farm. Zoe's eyes widened. A real farm? With animals and everything? I'm not sure about animals, Olivia admitted. I don't know much about it at all. But we're going to visit tomorrow to find out. The thing is, she took a deep breath, we might need to think about living there, at least for a while. Because of the money problems? Zoe asked quietly. Despite Olivia's best efforts to shield her daughter from their financial struggles, Zoe was perceptive enough to notice the mounting stress, the careful budgeting, the decline in grocery quality. Yes, sweetheart. Things have been tough since I lost my job. But this farm might be a new opportunity for us. It's further from town, and you might need to change schools. But will it be our own place? Zoe interrupted. One that nobody can take away from us? The question pierced Olivia's heart. At 10 years old, her daughter was already concerned about housing security, a worry no child should carry. Yes, she said firmly. If we decide to keep it, it would be completely ours. The next morning, they drove the 75 miles to Clearwater County, the landscape gradually transforming from suburban developments to sprawling farmland. Ms. Wilson had provided coordinates rather than an address, explaining that the rural property didn't have traditional street numbering. It feels like we're explorers, Zoe commented, watching the endless fields roll by. Do you think Uncle Robert was a spy or something? Why else would he have disappeared from the family? Olivia smiled at her daughter's imagination. I doubt it, honey. From what little my dad told me, Robert was just different. He wanted a quieter life away from people. The GPS directed them onto a gravel road that wound through tall cornfields before opening to reveal their destination. As they crested a small hill, Olivia's first sight of her inheritance made her heart sink. The farmhouse was worse than she had anticipated. A 2-story structure with peeling paint, a partially collapsed front porch, and several broken windows, covered with plywood. Around it stood a weathered barn, a small equipment shed, and about 50 yards away, the grain silo she had spotted in the satellite images, a cylindrical tower of corrugated metal rising about 60 feet high, topped with a conical roof. Ms. Wilson's sedan was already parked in the overgrown driveway. The attorney stood beside it, consulting her phone. She looked up as Olivia's car approached, offering a small wave. It's kind of a fixer-upper, Zoe said optimistically as they parked beside Ms. Wilson. That's one way to put it, Olivia agreed, already calculating the enormous amount of work the house would need to be habitable. Perhaps selling really was the only option. Ms. Wilson greeted them with a firm handshake. I warned you about the condition, she said apologetically. Robert lived almost exclusively in one room toward the end. The property has been vacant for about 3 months since he was moved to hospice care. Did he have any friends? Olivia asked. Anyone who checked on him? A few neighbors helped out occasionally, but he was notoriously private, kept to himself mostly. One neighbor mentioned that he spent a lot of time in that silo, which is unusual. Most of these old structures are empty or used for basic storage. Olivia glanced at the silo, remembering the cryptic note. The answers are in the silo. Ms. Wilson handed over a set of keys. House key, barn key, and this unusual one with the electronic component. No idea what it opens, but it was with his personal effects. The property deed transfer will take a few weeks to process, but you have legal access starting today. I've left all the paperwork in a folder on the kitchen table. Take your time looking around and call me if you have any questions. After the attorney departed, Olivia and Zoe cautiously approached the farmhouse. The interior was as neglected as the exterior: dust-covered furniture, cobwebs in corners, water stains on the ceiling. Yet structurally, Olivia's trained eye could see the bones were solid. The foundation appeared intact, the roof damage was limited to one corner, and the electrical panel had been updated relatively recently. Mom, can we check out the silo? Zoe asked after they'd explored the main floor of the house. Uncle Robert's note said something important was there, right? The silo stood like a sentinel in the field, its once red paint faded to a rusty pink. As they approached, Olivia noticed something odd. Unlike most agricultural silos she'd seen, this one had a modern steel door at its base with what appeared to be an electronic keypad beside it. That's strange, she murmured, examining the door. Grain silos usually have ground-level access points, but not security doors like this. She tried the unusual key Ms. Wilson had given her, discovering that it had both a traditional metal component and what looked like an electronic chip embedded in the handle. When she inserted it into the lock, the keypad beside the door lit up with a green light. It wants a code, Zoe observed. Olivia frowned, trying to think. What code would Robert have used? What would he expect her to know? "Let me try something," she said, remembering her father once mentioning Robert's obsession with prime numbers. She entered her birth date, the 7th of March, 83. The keypad flashed red. "Maybe try your birthday backwards," Zoe suggested. Olivia entered the 3rd of July, 83. Another red flash. Zoe studied the keypad thoughtfully. "What about your dad's birthday?" "Since he was Uncle Robert's brother." Olivia entered her father's birth date, the 2nd of November, 56. The keypad remained red, but then Zoe spotted something. "Mom, look! There's something scratched into the metal here." Near the bottom of the door frame, barely visible, was small scratched. Numbers, 19 to the 7th of March, 83. "It is my birthday," Olivia realized, "just formatted differently." She entered the numbers. The keypad glowed green, and with a heavy mechanical sound, the steel door unlocked. "He wanted you to find it," Zoe whispered, excitement building in her voice. "It's like a treasure hunt." Olivia pushed the door open, revealing not the empty, cylindrical space she expected, but a small antechamber with concrete walls and another heavy door beyond it. This second door had a wheel lock similar to those on bank vaults or submarine hatches. "This isn't a grain silo," Olivia said slowly, her structural engineer's mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. "This is something else entirely." With Zoe's help, she turned the wheel lock, which moved surprisingly smoothly for its apparent age. The second door swung open to reveal a spiral staircase descending into darkness. "Should we go down?" Zoe asked, a mixture of excitement and apprehension in her voice. Olivia hesitated, then pulled out her phone and turned on its flashlight. "Stay right behind me," she instructed, and they began their descent. The staircase spiraled down about 20 feet before opening into a space that made Olivia gasp aloud. They weren't standing in a silo at all, but in what appeared to be a fully equipped underground bunker. The circular room, approximately 50 feet in diameter, had concrete walls lined with metal shelving units, electronic equipment, and what looked like communication systems. Olivia's flashlight beam revealed more details: sleeping quarters with built-in bunks, a kitchenette with stainless steel counters, bathroom facilities, and several closed doors leading to additional rooms. The space was dusty, but remarkably well preserved. "Mom," Zoe said, her voice hushed with awe, "I think Uncle Robert was a spy." Before Olivia could respond, she noticed a large switch on the wall labeled Main Power. Taking a chance, she flipped it upward. With a low hum, lights flickered to life throughout the bunker, revealing its full extent. The walls were painted a utilitarian gray, and on one of them hung a large seal that made Olivia's breath catch in her throat, the official emblem of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Not a spy," she corrected her daughter. "FBI." On a central desk sat a leather-bound logbook beside what appeared to be a radio communications system. Olivia opened the logbook, reading the first entry dated June 12, 1962, Clearwater Station. Operational. Designated as Response Center for Northwestern Quadrant under Operation Safeguard. Primary purpose: continuity of communications and emergency response coordination in event of nuclear attack. Secondary purpose: rural monitoring station for domestic security operations. Personnel: 2 rotating agents on 3-month assignments. "Wow," Zoe breathed, looking around with newfound understanding. "It's a real secret government bunker." As Olivia flipped through more pages, the history of the facility unfolded. The bunker had been part of a nationwide network of rural response stations established during the height of the Cold War, designed to maintain government operations in the event of a nuclear attack on major cities. The final official entry was dated November 3, 1988, noting station decommissioned under budget revision FCSB 103, equipment to remain in place for possible reactivation. Site designated for passive monitoring only. The next entry, in different handwriting, explained everything. Station purchased through civilian cover by Agent Robert Bennett, retired, to maintain operational readiness outside official channels. Personal funds used for maintenance and upgrades. Unofficial status acknowledged by Deputy Director Harkins. See Memorandum and Secure File. Uncle Robert was an FBI agent, Olivia said aloud, pieces falling into place. He bought this farm as his cover and kept the bunker operational even after the government officially abandoned it. A sealed envelope taped to the final page of the logbook bore Olivia's name. With trembling hands, she opened it and read, "Olivia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you've figured out the silo secret. I've watched your career from afar, a brilliant structural engineer who builds things to last, just like your old uncle. I couldn't reach out directly because of my work, but I kept tabs on you and Zoe. I'm sorry for my absence from your life. Some choices I made for national security cost me my family connections, a price I wasn't prepared for but had to accept. This facility represents my life's work. When the Bureau decommissioned these stations, I couldn't bear to see this one stripped and abandoned. I purchased the farm through channels that wouldn't raise flags and maintained the bunker with my own resources. The communication systems here have saved lives during emergencies when official channels failed. The bunker is yours now. The technology has been updated regularly: satellite communications, emergency response systems, power backup. It can operate off-grid indefinitely. In the storage room marked Contingency, you'll find documentation of its capabilities and legal status. Yes, it's all legitimate. I made sure of that. Maplewood faces increasing wildfire threats that the local government isn't prepared for. The prediction models in the weather monitoring station show a catastrophic fire season approaching. This facility could serve as an emergency coordination center if needed. I trust you'll know what to do with this place. Your structural expertise and Zoe's compassionate spirit make you the perfect stewards for this unusual inheritance. Your Uncle Robert." Olivia lowered the letter, looking around the bunker with new eyes. This wasn't just a Cold War relic or an eccentric uncle's hideaway. It was a fully functional emergency response center with capabilities the small rural community of Maplewood didn't have access to. And according to Robert's letter, it might soon be desperately needed. "Mom?" Zoe asked, noting her mother's expression. "What did Uncle Robert say?" Olivia handed her daughter the letter. "It looks like we've inherited more than just a farm, sweetheart. We've inherited a responsibility." As Zoe read, Olivia explored further, opening the door marked Contingency. Inside, she found exactly what Robert had promised: detailed documentation of the bunker's systems, legal paperwork establishing its status as a privately maintained emergency response facility, and permits that had somehow been kept current through the decades. Most concerning was a weather monitoring station in another room, showing data that confirmed Robert's warning. The computer models displayed increasing temperature patterns, dangerous dryness levels in the surrounding forests, and wind predictions that created perfect conditions for catastrophic wildfires, precisely in the direction of Maplewood. When she returned to the main room, Zoe was sitting at the communication console, studying it with intense curiosity. "Uncle Robert was preparing for something bad to happen," she said, looking up at her mother. "And he thought we could help stop it." Olivia nodded slowly, her mind racing with implications. The foreclosure notice that had seemed like the end of their world this morning now felt insignificant compared to what they'd discovered. "We need to understand everything this place can do," she said, making a decision. "And then we need to figure out how to use it to help Maplewood." That night, they camped in the bunker rather than the dilapidated farmhouse, Olivia too engrossed in the facility's capabilities to leave. As Zoe slept peacefully in one of the bunks, Olivia pored over manuals and system diagnostics, her engineering mind quickly grasping the bunker's technological infrastructure. The communication systems were particularly impressive: satellite uplinks, radio frequencies reserved for emergency services, and a direct connection to weather monitoring satellites that provided real-time data unavailable to local authorities. Robert had maintained everything meticulously, with power supplied by a combination of solar panels disguised as farm equipment, a wind turbine that appeared to be an ordinary windmill from the outside, and backup generators with fuel reserves. Most importantly, she discovered a detailed evacuation and emergency response plan for Maplewood and surrounding communities that Robert had developed but never had the opportunity to implement. According to his notes, he had tried to warn local officials about the increasing wildfire risks, but without revealing his FBI background or the bunker's existence, his concerns had been dismissed as an old man's paranoia. As dawn broke, Olivia had made her decision. They would keep the farm and the bunker. They would move in immediately, staying in the bunker while gradually renovating the farmhouse. And they would prepare to implement Robert's emergency response plan if the predicted wildfire season proved as dangerous as his model suggested. When Zoe awoke, Olivia shared her plans. "We're going to need to pack up our things from the house in Maplewood and move them here. We'll be pioneers for a while, living in this bunker until we can fix up the farmhouse." Instead of disappointment at the dramatic change in circumstances, Zoe's face lit up with purpose. "We're going to help save people if the fires come. Aren't we? That's what Uncle Robert wanted." "Yes," Olivia confirmed, amazed at her daughter's intuitive understanding. "But we need to be smart about how we do it. We can't just tell people we found a secret FBI bunker. They wouldn't believe us, and it might create problems." Over breakfast from the bunker's well-stocked pantry, Robert had maintained supplies meticulously. They formulated their approach. They would move to the farm immediately, explaining to neighbors that they'd inherited the property and were planning renovations. Olivia would reach out to local emergency services as a structural engineer, concerned about wildfire preparedness, gradually introducing the resources they could offer without immediately revealing their full extent. "It's like a superhero origin story," Zoe observed as they outlined their plan. "We have a secret base and special technology, but we have to be careful how we use it." Olivia smiled at her daughter's framing, but recognized the truth in it. They had been handed extraordinary resources and responsibility through this unusual inheritance. How they used it would determine whether they could truly make a difference when the crisis Robert had predicted eventually arrived. As they prepared to return to Maplewood to pack their belongings, Olivia took one last look around the bunker, at the communications equipment, the emergency supplies, the monitoring systems tracking the growing wildfire threat, and felt a strange mix of trepidation and purpose. The foreclosure notice that had seemed like the end of their world just yesterday had led them to an unexpected beginning. What had started as a desperate housing crisis had transformed into something far larger than themselves. For the first time in months, Olivia felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. "Ready to go, Mom?" Zoe asked, standing by the spiral staircase. "Ready," Olivia confirmed, switching off the main lights but leaving the monitoring systems running. "We've got work to do." As they emerged from the silo into the bright summer day, the structure's ordinary exterior gave no hint of the extraordinary facility hidden beneath. Just like their new purpose, the true value of Robert Bennett's legacy was invisible to the casual observer, but it held the potential to change everything. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity as Olivia and Zoe transitioned from their foreclosed home in Maplewood to the Bennett farm. They had packed their essential belongings into a rented moving truck, said emotional goodbyes to neighbors, and arranged for Zoe to finish the school year remotely, a small blessing of the post-pandemic educational system that had maintained flexible learning options. "Do we tell anyone about what's under the silo?" Zoe had asked as they drove toward their new home, the moving truck following behind them, driven by Tim, a kind neighbor who had volunteered to help. "Not yet," Olivia answered carefully. "Uncle, Robert kept it secret for a reason. We need to understand everything about it first, and then decide who needs to know." The farm's dilapidated appearance had earned a concerned look from Tim as they unloaded their belongings into the least damaged section of the house, the kitchen and adjacent living room, which Olivia had hastily cleaned and inspected for safety. "You sure about this place, Liv?" he'd asked quietly while Zoe was exploring the barn. "Seems like it needs a lot of work." "It's ours free and clear," Olivia had explained with a conviction that surprised her. "No mortgage, no landlord. I can fix the structural issues and will renovate one room at a time. The property has good bones." She'd thanked him for his help, promising to invite him and his family for dinner once they were settled. What she couldn't tell him was that they wouldn't actually be living in the rundown farmhouse yet. Each night after visitors left, they moved essential items down to the comfortable, climate-controlled bunker beneath the silo. Now 14 days after discovering their inheritance, Olivia stood in what had once been the bunker's communication center, but had been transformed into a combination living space and command center. She had pushed the military-style cots together to create a proper bed for Zoe, set up their personal computer alongside the bunker's more specialized equipment, and organized their belongings to make the space feel like home. The central desk now held Olivia's engineering reference books alongside the bunker's technical manuals. She had been studying both intensively, understanding how her structural expertise could complement the emergency response capabilities Robert had maintained. "Mom, come see what I found." Zoe called from one of the storage rooms they hadn't fully explored yet. Olivia followed her daughter's voice to discover her examining what appeared to be educational materials, textbooks, scientific equipment, and teaching aids covering subjects from basic mathematics to advanced physics. "Uncle Robert collected teaching supplies," Zoe explained, holding up a high-quality microscope. "There's enough stuff here for a whole classroom." Olivia examined the materials, noting their professional quality. "I think he might have been preparing for more than just emergency response. These are the kinds of supplies you'd want if you were establishing a long-term shelter, something educational for the next generation." The discovery reinforced what they'd been learning about Robert Bennett over the past 2 weeks. Through careful review of his personal journals and the bunker's documentation, they had pieced together his remarkable story. Robert hadn't just been any FBI agent. He had been part of an elite division focused on critical infrastructure protection. During the Cold War, when budget cuts led to the decommissioning of rural response stations like this one, Robert had taken extraordinary measures to maintain it privately, believing these distributed emergency centers were vital for national resilience. He had purchased the farm through channels that wouldn't connect him to his FBI work, officially retired from the Bureau, and dedicated his remaining years to maintaining the facility while living the cover identity of a reclusive farmer. His foresight had proven valuable on at least 3 previous occasions, when the bunker's communications had been used during regional emergencies when official channels were overwhelmed. He was preparing for us, Olivia realized, looking at the carefully preserved educational materials. He knew someday someone would inherit this place, and he wanted them to have everything they needed, not just for emergency response, but for rebuilding afterward if necessary. The weather monitoring systems Robert had maintained continued to show concerning patterns. The drought conditions were worsening, temperatures were climbing earlier than historical norms, and fuel loads in the forests surrounding Maplewood were reaching dangerous levels. According to the prediction models, they had perhaps 6 to 8 weeks before the wildfire risk would reach critical levels. That evening, after Zoe had gone to bed, Olivia reviewed the emergency response plan Robert had developed. It was comprehensive. including evacuation routes, communication protocols, and resource coordination strategies. The challenge would be implementing it without revealing the bunker's classified history or creating panic in the community. Olivia's phone chimed with a notification, a response to the email she'd sent to Maplewood's volunteer fire chief earlier that day, introducing herself as a structural engineer with wildfire mitigation experience who had recently moved to the area. Chief Mike Donovan had replied immediately, inviting her to the station to discuss her concerns. Progress, Olivia thought, one careful step at a time. The next morning, she drove into Maplewood while Zoe stayed at the farm, continuing her remote schoolwork and secretly cataloging the bunker's resources. The Maplewood Volunteer Fire Department operated from a modest single-story building on the edge of town. Chief Donovan, a weather-beaten man in his 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted her in the station's small conference room. "Appreciate you reaching out," he said after introductions. "We don't get many structural engineers in these parts, especially ones concerned about our wildfire preparedness. I've been reviewing historical data and current conditions." Olivia explained, sharing the less classified portions of the information she'd gathered from the bunker's systems. The combination of drought conditions, fuel loads in the forests, and predicted weather patterns suggests this could be an exceptionally dangerous fire season. The chief studied her materials with growing concern. "These projections are more detailed than anything the county shared with us. Where did you get this data?" Olivia had prepared for this question. "I worked on wildfire mitigation for several engineering projects in California. I've maintained access to some specialized monitoring systems through professional connections." Not entirely untrue, though significantly understating the sophistication of the bunker's capabilities. "Well, you're not wrong about our situation," Chief Donovan admitted. "We've been trying to sound the alarm with county officials for months, but the budget for preparedness measures keeps getting cut. We're a volunteer department with equipment that's seen better days and limited water access in the rural areas." He pointed to the map Olivia had brought. "These evacuation routes you've marked, they're good in theory, but half these rural roads wouldn't handle the traffic if everyone tried to leave at once. And our early warning system is basically me calling a list of people who call other people. What if you had access to better resources?" Olivia asked carefully. "Better communications, real-time mapping, coordination capabilities?" The chief gave her a curious look. "That would change everything. But resources like that don't just appear out of nowhere, especially not in a town like Maplewood." "I might have some connections that could help," Olivia offered. "No promises yet, but I'm exploring options. In the meantime, I'd like to volunteer. My engineering expertise, structural assessments, defensive space planning, whatever would be most useful." By the end of their meeting, Olivia had been officially welcomed as a volunteer consultant to the fire department. Chief Donovan had shared their limited resources and preparations, confirming her fears that Maplewood was dangerously underprepared for the coming fire season. As she drove back to the farm, Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. The bunker had exactly the capabilities Maplewood needed: satellite communications, emergency coordination systems, backup power, and sophisticated monitoring equipment. The challenge would be introducing these resources without raising questions about their origin. When she returned, she found Zoe in the bunker's main room, surrounded by papers covered in her careful handwriting. "I made an inventory," her daughter announced proudly. "Everything in the bunker, organized by category and location. And I found something else you should see." Zoe led her to a secure cabinet they hadn't previously opened. Using the key codes they'd discovered in Robert's journals, Zoe unlocked it to reveal official-looking documents bearing FBI seals. "It's called Operation Community Shield," Zoe explained. "Uncle Robert wrote it after he officially retired. It's a plan for converting classified emergency facilities into community resources during disasters while maintaining operational security." Olivia reviewed the documents with growing excitement. Robert hadn't just maintained the bunker. He had developed an official protocol for transitioning such facilities from classified status to community emergency resources when needed. The protocol included legal frameworks, security procedures, and public communication strategies designed to make the capabilities available without compromising sensitive aspects of the facility. Most importantly, the documents carried signatures from senior FBI officials, dated just 3 years earlier. Robert had continued to maintain connections with the Bureau and had secured official, if quiet, approval for his contingency plans. This changes everything, Olivia realized. We don't have to figure this out alone. There's already a framework in place and official authorization. The documents included contact information for the FBI's Critical Infrastructure Protection Division, Robert's former unit, with instructions for activation of the Community Shield Protocol. After careful consideration, Olivia decided it was time to make the call. The response was immediate. Within hours, she received a secure video call from Assistant Director Marcus Chun, who explained that Robert Bennett had been a legendary figure within the Bureau, the agent who had insisted on maintaining rural response capabilities when official policy had shifted toward centralization. "We were briefed about your inheritance when Agent Bennett passed," Director Chun explained. "We've been waiting to see if you would discover the facility's true purpose and reach out." "So the Bureau knows about all this?" Olivia asked, gesturing to the bunker around her. Bennett's operation existed in a unique category, officially decommissioned but unofficially supported. His Community Shield Protocol was visionary, anticipating the increasing need for distributed emergency response capabilities in an era of climate-driven disasters. The Bureau has quietly incorporated his model into our current planning. Director Chun explained that under the Community Shield Protocol, Olivia had several options. The Bureau could reactivate the facility under official control, or Olivia could maintain private ownership with Bureau support during emergencies. Either way, the resources could be made available to Maplewood through proper channels. Bennett believed these facilities operated best with local knowledge and leadership, Chun added. "That's why he left it to you specifically. Your engineering background makes you uniquely qualified to understand both the structural and organizational systems involved." After discussing the options, Olivia chose to maintain private ownership while establishing official connection with the Bureau's Emergency Response Network. This would allow the facility to serve Maplewood while preserving the independence Robert had valued. Director Chun promised to send a technical team to update critical systems and establish secure connections with current emergency networks. Most importantly, he provided official documentation that would allow Olivia to approach Maplewood's authorities with a simplified version of the truth that she had inherited a privately maintained emergency response facility that could be integrated with local services. The next day, Olivia met again with Chief Donovan, this time bringing the carefully prepared documentation from the FBI. She explained that her uncle had been a former emergency management specialist who had established a private response facility on the farm property. "It's unconventional," she acknowledged as the chief reviewed the papers with widening eyes, "but it's been properly maintained and has capabilities that could significantly enhance Maplewood's emergency preparedness, especially for the coming fire season. This is..." Chief Donovan seemed at a loss for words as he examined the satellite communication specifications, monitoring capabilities, and coordination systems described in the documents. "This is beyond anything I imagined when you mentioned resources. Why would your uncle build something like this out here?" "He believed in distributed resilience," Olivia explained, using Robert's own philosophy, that small communities needed independent capabilities because centralized systems often fail during major disasters. He spent his career in emergency management and chose to invest his resources in creating this facility. It wasn't the complete truth, but it was close enough, and the official FBI documentation provided legitimacy that prevented deeper questioning. I need to bring the mayor and county emergency coordinator into this conversation, Chief Donovan said finally. If this facility is even half as capable as these specs suggest, it could revolutionize our emergency response capacity. The meeting with Maplewood's officials was scheduled for the following day. That evening, as Olivia and Zoe ate dinner in the bunker, they discussed how much their lives had changed in just over 2 weeks. We went from losing our house to having a secret underground base that might save the whole town, Zoe observed, helping herself to another serving of the pasta they'd prepared in the bunker's compact but functional kitchen. Life takes unexpected turns, Olivia agreed. 2 weeks ago, I felt like I had failed you. Couldn't keep a roof over our heads. Couldn't find a job. Couldn't provide stability. You never failed me, Zoe said with a conviction that brought tears to Olivia's eyes. You always figure things out, even when it's really hard. That's what you're doing now, just on a bigger scale. The next morning, an unmarked van arrived at the farm, carrying the FBI technical team Director Chun had promised. Led by a no-nonsense technician named Rodriguez, they began the process of updating the bunker's systems while carefully preserving Robert's modifications. Bennett was a legend, Rodriguez told Olivia as they worked. He maintained this facility better than some of our official sites. Most of what we're doing is just connecting his systems to our current networks and updating encryption protocols. By afternoon, the bunker had been fully integrated into the FBI's emergency response network while maintaining its independent status under the Community Shield Protocol. Rodriguez provided Olivia with credentials and training on the updated systems as well as secure communication channels to Bureau resources. As the technical team departed, the time arrived for the meeting with Maplewood's officials. Chief Donovan arrived first, followed by Mayor Sandra Wilson, a sharp-minded woman in her 60s who had led Maplewood for over a decade, and County Emergency Coordinator Thomas Grant, whose skeptical expression suggested he wasn't easily impressed. Olivia had decided, after consultation with Director Chun, that a limited tour of the facility would be the most effective way to establish credibility. She led the officials to the silo, explaining as they approached that they were about to see something unexpected. My uncle Robert Bennett was an emergency management specialist who believed rural communities needed independent response capabilities, she explained, using the cover story approved by the Bureau. What looks like an ordinary grain silo from the outside is actually something quite different. The officials' expressions transformed from polite interest to astonishment as Olivia unlocked the security door and led them down into the bunker. Chief Donovan, who had been partially briefed, still whistled in appreciation as they entered the main command center, now humming with updated technology after the FBI team's visit. This is extraordinary, Mayor Wilson said, examining the communications equipment and monitoring displays. And your uncle built all this privately? He established it during his career and maintained it after retirement, Olivia explained. He believed in being prepared for worst-case scenarios, particularly in areas where traditional emergency services might be overwhelmed or cut off. County Coordinator Grant, whose skepticism had initially been most apparent, was studying the weather and fire monitoring systems with growing interest. These models show a much more severe fire risk than our county assessments, he noted, pointing to the displays showing drought conditions and fuel load maps. The system integrates data from multiple satellites and ground sensors, Olivia explained. It's designed to provide earlier warning and more detailed predictive capability than standard monitoring. And you're offering to make this facility available to Maplewood's emergency services? Mayor Wilson clarified, still appearing slightly overwhelmed by the revelation. Yes, Olivia confirmed. My daughter and I have inherited this property, but we recognize that its capabilities are meant to serve the broader community, especially with the fire season approaching. I'm proposing we establish a formal partnership between this facility and Maplewood's emergency management system. The discussion that followed was detailed and practical, how the facility would be staffed. During emergencies, communication protocols between the bunker and town services, training needs for key personnel, and public messaging that would explain the new resources without creating unnecessary concern. By the end of the meeting, an initial framework had been established. The bunker would be designated as the Bennett Emergency Response Center, operating as a private facility in partnership with Maplewood's official services. Olivia would serve as facility director, with Chief Donovan as the primary operational liaison. This is the most significant enhancement to our emergency preparedness I've seen in my 15 years as mayor, Mayor Wilson said as they concluded. Whatever your uncle's reasons for creating this facility, Maplewood is fortunate that it's now in your hands, Ms. Bennett. As the officials departed, Coordinator Grant lingered behind. I've worked in emergency management for 20 years. He said quietly to Olivia, "This facility has capabilities beyond what's typical for private emergency response centers. Your uncle must have had serious connections." "He was dedicated to his work," Olivia replied carefully. Grant nodded, seeming to accept that he wouldn't get a more detailed explanation. "Whatever the background, I'm glad it's here. Based on these monitoring systems, we're heading into the most dangerous fire season I've seen in my career. Maplewood's going to need every advantage it can get." After the officials left, Olivia found Zoe waiting anxiously in the farmhouse kitchen, where she had stayed during the meeting as they had agreed. "Did they like our secret base?" she asked immediately. "They were impressed," Olivia confirmed, with a smile, "and a little confused about why it exists, but the documentation from the FBI helped smooth that over. We're officially partners with Maplewood's emergency services now, so we can really help if the fires come." "Yes," Olivia said, hugging her daughter, "we really can help." That evening, as they prepared for bed in their underground home, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 2 weeks. From the devastation of foreclosure to becoming the steward of a critical emergency resource, it was a transformation she could never have imagined. The bunker's main screen displayed the latest fire risk assessment, showing the dangers steadily increasing as summer approached. The road ahead would be challenging, training volunteers, integrating their systems with Maplewood's limited resources, preparing the community for what might come. Yet for the first time in months, Olivia felt a sense of purpose and direction. The structural engineer who had lost her job and nearly lost her home had found an unexpected way to use her skills for something vitally important. The single mother who had worried about providing for her daughter was now positioned to help protect an entire community. As she checked on Zoe, already asleep amid her books and notes about the bunker's systems, Olivia felt a surge of gratitude toward the uncle she had barely known. Robert Bennett had created not just a physical legacy in this unusual facility, but a purposeful one, a way for his family to make a meaningful difference when it mattered most. Outside, the summer wind whispered through the fields surrounding the old farm, carrying the scent of dry grass and warming earth, early warning signs of the challenges to come. But beneath the unassuming silo, in a place where past and future converged, Olivia Bennett closed her eyes with newfound confidence. They were ready for whatever might come. What she didn't yet realize was how soon and how severely that readiness would be tested. The transformation of the Bennett farm over. The next 4 weeks amazed even Olivia, who had orchestrated much of it. What had begun as an abandoned property with a hidden secret had evolved into a hub of purposeful activity that energized not just her and Zoe, but an expanding circle of Maplewood residents who had embraced the emergency preparedness mission. "Mom, the drone team is here for training," Zoe called from the farmhouse porch, where she had appointed herself official greeter and coordinator of the volunteer schedule. At 10 years old, she had naturally assumed a role that showcased her organizational talents, maintaining the visitor log and ensuring everyone signed the discretion agreements that the FBI had recommended. Olivia emerged from the silo bunker, now officially designated as the Bennett Emergency Response Center, where she had been finalizing communication protocols with Rodriguez, the FBI technician who had become their regular liaison. The farmyard, once overgrown and neglected, had been cleared and organized into functional areas, parking for volunteers, equipment storage, and a training zone for the various teams being established. "Thanks, sweetheart," she replied, watching, as 3 SUVs pulled up the gravel driveway. "Can you show them to the equipment shed while I finish up with Rodriguez?" Zoe wasn't just a child to be protected. She had become an essential part of their mission, contributing in ways that belied her age. "Okay," Olivia agreed. "But you stay in the bunker, no matter what happens. Promise me." As dawn broke over, Maplewood, nearly 70% of the town's residents had been successfully evacuated. The remainder were either in the process of leaving or had reported to designated shelter locations for those without transportation. The Bennett Center coordinated it all, its systems tracking evacuation progress, fire movement, and resource deployment with a precision that had impressed even the veteran emergency managers. The deliberately set fire near the reservoir had been contained thanks to rapid response by the FBI teams and local firefighters, but the main fire front continued its relentless advance. It had reached the edge of Maplewood's watershed, just 15 miles from the town itself, and was moving faster than suppression efforts could match. "We're shifting to defensive strategies," Chief Donovan announced during the morning briefing. "Protecting critical infrastructure and creating fire breaks around the town perimeter. State resources are focusing on protecting evacuation corridors." The FBI's specialized equipment was deployed along Maplewood's western edge, establishing thermal barriers and fire retardant zones to create defensible spaces. Meanwhile, Agent Harper's security team had apprehended 2 suspicious individuals attempting to approach the Bennett property from the north, confirmation that the facility itself remained a target even as the wildfire crisis intensified. As midday approached, with the main fire front now visible as a smoky haze on the western horizon, Olivia took a moment alone in the bunker's small office that had been Robert Bennett's personal workspace. Among his effects, she had found a letter addressed to the inheritor of Clearwater Station, a message he had written for whoever might eventually take responsibility for his life's work. She opened it now, seeking guidance from the uncle she had never known, but whose legacy had transformed her life in ways she could never have imagined. "If you're reading this during a crisis," Robert had written, "remember that the true purpose of this facility isn't the technology or the systems, impressive as they may be. It's about providing hope and leadership when conventional structures fail. The bunker is just concrete and steel. The real resource is the human capacity to rise above crisis and find solutions where none seem possible. Trust that capacity in yourself and those around you. It has never failed me, and it won't fail you." Olivia folded the letter carefully and returned it to its envelope. Through the office window, she could see the bunker's main room where volunteers and officials worked with focused determination despite exhaustion and worry. Among them, Zoe moved purposefully between stations, delivering messages and updates with a confidence that made Olivia's heart swell with pride. Robert had been right. The true resource wasn't the bunker itself, but the human spirit it enabled, the capacity of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when given the tools and purpose to make a difference. With renewed determination, Olivia rejoined the emergency operations team. The fire was coming, faster and more threatening than they had initially predicted. But thanks to an eccentric FBI agent's foresight and a community's courage, Maplewood faced the approaching inferno not with hopeless resignation but with organized resistance. The next 12 hours would determine whether their preparations had been enough. As the fire crested the final ridge separating it from Maplewood, Olivia Bennett stood ready at the heart of the response effort, a structural engineer who had found her true structure to build, a foundation of resilience for an entire community. The world outside the Bennett Center had transformed into an apocalyptic landscape as night fell. The western sky glowed an unnatural orange-red, while thick smoke turned the air acrid and visibility to near zero beyond the property's boundaries. Inside the bunker, the atmosphere was one of intense focus as Olivia coordinated what had become a multi-agency emergency response unlike anything Maplewood had ever experienced. "Fire front has reached Miller's Creek watershed," reported Chief Donovan, his voice hoarse from smoke exposure and exhaustion. "It's moving faster than the models predicted. The drought conditions created the perfect storm." Olivia studied the real-time mapping display where thermal imaging from satellites and drones painted a terrifying picture. The main fire had split into 3 fronts, the largest heading directly toward Maplewood's western neighborhoods. Spot fires ignited by wind-carried embers were appearing miles ahead of the main front, complicating containment efforts. "The states deployed everything they have," County Coordinator Grant added, gesturing to the resource map showing firefighting assets positioned around the region. But with 3 other major fires burning across the state, resources are stretched to breaking point. Agent Harper joined them, her FBI tactical gear dusty from field operations. "We've confirmed at least 4 deliberately set ignition points designed to flank fire lines," she reported grimly. "My team apprehended 2 suspects, but we believe others are still operating in the area." The combined natural and human-caused disaster had escalated beyond worst-case scenarios. 90% of Maplewood's residents had evacuated successfully. But the remaining 10%, mostly elderly residents, those without transportation, and a few who had refused to leave, were now at serious risk as the fire approached the town limits. "The western evacuation route will be compromised within the hour," Olivia announced after analyzing the latest projections. "We need to implement the emergency shelter protocol immediately." Mayor Wilson, who had remained at the center despite opportunities to evacuate, nodded grimly. "Authorize it. How many can the bunker accommodate?" 50 in emergency conditions, Olivia confirmed. "We've identified 87 residents still in town who will need shelter. The high school gymnasium can take the overflow if we can get them there before the fire reaches town." The mayor made the difficult decision. Priority to those with medical needs, the elderly, and families with young children for the bunker. The rest to the high school with whatever firefighting resources we can spare to protect that location. Olivia turned to Zoe, who had been assisting with communications throughout the crisis. "I need you to help coordinate the shelter preparations. Set up the sleeping areas and organize the supply distribution." Zoe nodded with the serious responsibility of someone far beyond her 10 years. The past weeks had transformed her from a child caught in a housing crisis to a vital contributor in an emergency operation. Without complaint, she had worked alongside adults, offering insights and taking on tasks that freed others for specialized roles. As emergency vehicles began transporting vulnerable residents to the Bennett Center, Olivia joined Chief Donovan at the tactical station where he was coordinating the final defensive efforts to protect Maplewood. "We're implementing a controlled burn here," he explained, indicating a section of land between the advancing fire and the town. "Creating a fire break by removing fuel from the fire's path. The FBI's thermal barriers are being deployed along this perimeter to reinforce it. Will it be enough?" Olivia asked, her engineering mind calculating fire spread rates against the time needed to complete these measures. The chief's expression was grave but determined. "Honestly, under normal circumstances, no. But your uncle's facility has given us tools no town our size has ever had during a wildfire. We're fighting this fire with real-time intelligence, coordinated resources, and technology usually reserved for protecting major cities or critical infrastructure. Robert believed small communities deserved the same protection as big ones. Olivia said, recalling her uncle's philosophy as documented in his journals. He was right, the chief replied. And after this, emergency management agencies across the country will be studying what happened here. Whatever the outcome, you've changed how rural communities will approach disaster response. Over the next few hours, the Bennett Center transformed into an emergency shelter as residents began arriving. Elderly couples clutching photo albums and medication, families with frightened children, individuals with medical needs requiring power for equipment. Zoe and a team of volunteers efficiently processed each arrival, assigning sleeping spaces in the bunker's dormitory areas and distributing emergency supplies. Olivia marveled at her daughter's compassionate efficiency. Zoe moved among the frightened residents with a calm reassurance that belied her age, explaining the bunker's safety features and establishing a sense of order amid chaos. Your daughter is remarkable, Mayor Wilson commented, joining Olivia at the observation window overlooking the main shelter area. She's providing more comfort to those people than most adults could. She's been through her own crisis, Olivia replied, thinking of the foreclosure notice that had seemed so devastating just weeks ago. I think it gave her perspective on what really matters when everything else falls apart. The mayor nodded thoughtfully. That's true for communities too. This fire is devastating, but I've never seen Maplewood so united. People who barely spoke to each other are now working side by side to save their town. A commotion at the bunker entrance interrupted their conversation. Agent Harper was escorting a man in firefighting gear who appeared to be in heated discussion with the security team. He claims to have critical information, Harper explained, as she approached Olivia. Says he worked with Robert Bennett years ago. We've verified his credentials as a former Bureau employee, but I wanted your approval before granting him access to the command center. The man stepped forward, late 60s, weathered face, alert eyes that assessed the bunker with practiced familiarity. James Mercer, he introduced himself. I served with Robert on the original Clearwater station, assignment in '85. When I saw the news about the Bennett Center coordinating the fire response, I knew he'd finally found someone worthy of continuing his work. Olivia studied him carefully. How did you know Robert? We were partners in the Bureau's Infrastructure Protection Division, Mercer explained. When the original stations were decommissioned, we both argued against it. Robert took it a step further, bought this place, and maintained it privately. I went into fire science instead, trying to improve prediction models. Which is why you're here now? Olivia asked. Mercer nodded grimly. The standard models aren't accounting for something. This fire is behaving abnormally, even beyond the deliberate ignition points. I think I know why, but I needed to see the data from Robert's monitoring systems to confirm it. After a brief consultation with Agent Harper, Olivia authorized Mercer's access to the monitoring station. Within minutes, his expertise became evident as he identified patterns in the weather and fire progression data that others had missed. Look here, he said, pointing to atmospheric readings from the bunkers. Advanced sensors. There's an unusual wind pattern developing, a microclimate effect created by the fire's own heat combined with the valley topography. It's creating a vortex effect that's accelerating spread in ways the standard models don't predict. Chief, Donovan studied the data with growing concern. If this is accurate, the fire break we're creating won't hold. The ember spread will jump it easily. Exactly, Mercer confirmed. You need to shift your defensive line 2 miles east, focusing on this ridgeline instead. The topography there will work with the wind patterns rather than against them. The chief immediately redirected resources based on this new analysis. while Mercer continued examining the bunker's historical data. His expression gradually shifted from professional concentration to personal concern. Robert documented similar patterns 3 years ago, he said quietly to Olivia. Microclimate anomalies that intensified fire behavior beyond normal parameters. He suspected they weren't entirely natural. What do you mean? Olivia asked. Climate manipulation research, Mercer explained, lowering his voice. There were classified programs studying weather modification technologies dating back to the Cold War. Most were officially discontinued, but Robert tracked evidence suggesting some research continued in the private sector. You're saying someone might be deliberately enhancing the fire behavior? Olivia asked incredulously. Not necessarily causing it, Mercer clarified, but potentially using an existing crisis to test atmospheric modification capabilities. It would explain the unusual interest in this facility during the emergency. Monitoring stations like this, one could detect evidence of such testing. This disturbing possibility added another dimension to the crisis they were facing. If Mercer was right, they weren't just fighting a natural disaster complicated by arson, but potentially a test of technologies designed to weaponize weather patterns. Before Olivia could process these implications fully, an urgent alert sounded. From the communication system, the fire had breached the western perimeter of Maplewood. The first structures within town limits were now burning. All units fall back to secondary defensive positions, Chief Donovan ordered through the emergency channel. Priority protection for evacuation corridors and designated shelter locations. The high school gymnasium, serving as the overflow shelter, was now directly threatened. Agent Harper immediately dispatched FBI tactical teams with their specialized fire suppression equipment to reinforce local firefighters, protecting the building and its occupants. We need to prepare for the possibility that those sheltering at the high school may need to be relocated here, Olivia told Mayor Wilson. That would put us well beyond intended capacity. Do what you need to do, the mayor authorized. We'll make it work. As Olivia and her team reconfigured the bunker's spaces to accommodate additional evacuees, Zoe approached with an observation that highlighted her unique perspective. Mom, we're not using the lower-level storage areas, she pointed out. If we move the emergency supplies up here, those rooms could shelter at least 20 more people. Olivia checked the facility schematics. Zoe was right. The lower storage areas could be converted to emergency shelter space if they redistributed resources. It was exactly the kind of adaptive thinking that made the difference in crisis situations. Excellent idea, she told her. Daughter, can you coordinate a team to make those changes? We might need that space very soon. As Zoe organized volunteers for this task, Agent Harper received alarming news through her secure channel. The fire has reached the North Access Road, she reported. Our thermal imaging shows temperatures exceeding containment capabilities. We're at risk of being cut off completely. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had anticipated. If both access roads became impassable, the Bennett Center would be isolated, a secure island in a sea of fire, but unable to receive additional evacuees or emergency resources. We have a narrow window to bring the high school evacuees here, Chief Donovan assessed. Maybe 2 hours before conditions make vehicle movement impossible. Initiate the transfer immediately, Mayor Wilson ordered. Every available vehicle with heat shielding. Priority evacuation protocols. What followed was a precisely coordinated operation that showcased the effectiveness of the systems and training they had implemented. The Bennett Center's communication capabilities enabled real-time routing of evacuation vehicles around fire hotspots. Drone surveillance identified safe corridors through the smoke and flames. FBI thermal barriers were deployed to protect critical road segments during the transfer. Olivia monitored it all from the bunker's command center, making split-second decisions as conditions evolved. Her structural engineering background had never seemed more relevant. She was essentially engineering a human evacuation structure, identifying load-bearing pathways and potential failure points, reinforcing vulnerable sections, and ensuring overall system integrity under extreme stress. 2 hours later, as the last evacuation vehicle reached the Bennett Center, the predicted wind vortex materialized with devastating effect. Wind speeds doubled, turning the main fire front into a roaring inferno that engulfed Maplewood's western neighborhoods within minutes. Both access roads were now impassable, thick smoke reducing visibility to zero while temperatures made surface conditions unsurvivable. The Bennett Center was now an island of safety in a firestorm, sheltering 142 people, nearly triple its designed capacity. Every available space had been converted to accommodate evacuees, from storage rooms to maintenance corridors. Environmental systems strained under the load but continued functioning thanks to Robert Bennett's over-engineered design and redundant systems. "We've got everyone from the high school," Chief Donovan confirmed, his face streaked with soot as he reported to the command center after supervising the final evacuation run. "But we've lost at least 30% of the town already. Without this facility, the casualty count would be catastrophic." Outside, the world had become a hellscape of smoke, ash, and flame. The bunker's external cameras showed apocalyptic scenes. Trees exploding in the intense heat, structures collapsing as fire consumed them. Day turned to eerie twilight by the thick smoke blocking the sun. Yet inside the Bennett Center, a remarkable calm prevailed. Evacuees had organized themselves into functional groups, some helping distribute supplies, others providing medical assistance or caring for children. The chaos and panic that often characterized disaster shelters was notably absent, replaced by a focused communal effort to make the best of an unimaginable situation. Zoe had established a children's area in one corner of the main room, leading activities that kept the youngest evacuees distracted from the terrifying reality outside. Watching her daughter comfort a crying 4-year-old while organizing a storytelling circle, Olivia felt a surge of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. Mercer joined her, following her gaze to Zoe. "Robert would be proud," he said quietly. "Not just of the facility functioning as he intended, but of how you've used it. The technology is just tools. It's the human element that makes the difference. I keep thinking about where we'd be if we hadn't inherited this place," Olivia admitted. 2 months ago, I was facing foreclosure, feeling like a failure because I couldn't keep a roof over our heads. Now we're sheltering half the town." "Life's strange that way," Mercer observed. "Sometimes what looks like your worst moment is actually the universe positioning you exactly where you need to be." A call from Agent Harper interrupted their conversation. "We've got communication from the State Emergency Command," she reported. "They're implementing an unprecedented response based on the data we're sending them." On the main screen, Governor Richards appeared, speaking from the State Emergency Management Center. "We've authorized deployment of the experimental aerial firefighting system," she announced. "Based on the meteorological data from the Bennett Center, we're positioning aircraft to disrupt the wind vortex pattern that's accelerating the fire." This was extraordinary, a state-level emergency response being guided by data from a formerly secret bunker beneath a grain silo on an inherited farm. Robert Bennett's vision of distributed emergency response capabilities was proving its value on a scale no one could have anticipated. Through the night, the Bennett Center continued its dual role: shelter for evacuees and command center for the broader firefighting effort. The bunker's advanced systems remained operational despite the inferno outside, providing critical data that guided resource deployment across the region. By dawn, the first signs of containment appeared as the aerial firefighting strategy began disrupting the wind patterns. The fire's advance slowed, then stabilized along the eastern edge of Maplewood. Nearly 60% of the town had been lost, but the defensive lines were finally holding. As morning light filtered through the smoke, revealing the devastation outside, Mayor Wilson called the shelter residents together in the bunker's main room. "I won't sugarcoat this," she told them honestly. "We've lost much of our town. Many of us have lost our homes. The road to recovery will be long and difficult." A somber silence fell over the crowded room as people absorbed this reality. Then the mayor continued, her voice gathering strength. "But look around you, we all survived. Every single resident of Maplewood is accounted for, no casualties. Despite facing one of the most devastating wildfires in state history. That miracle happened because of where we're standing right now." She gestured to the bunker around them. "This facility existed because one man believed small communities deserved the same protection as big cities. It saved us because one woman and her daughter had the courage to discover its purpose and share it with their community when they could have kept it to themselves." All eyes turned to Olivia and Zoe, standing together near the communication station. 2 months ago, Olivia Bennett inherited an old farm with a strange silo, the mayor continued. She could have sold it, taken the money, and moved somewhere easier. Instead, she looked deeper, found its true purpose, and turned a personal inheritance into a community resource that saved hundreds of lives. The spontaneous applause that followed brought tears to Olivia's eyes. She felt Zoe's hand slip into hers, squeezing with quiet pride. Chief Donovan joined them, bringing updated reports from the firefighting efforts. "The containment is holding," he confirmed. "State resources are securing the perimeter, and weather conditions are finally working in our favor. We should be able to begin surface operations within 24 hours. This promising news shifted the atmosphere in the shelter. People began discussing next steps, where they would go when it was safe to leave, how they would begin rebuilding, what Maplewood might become as it recovered from this disaster. Later that day, as Olivia took a rare break in the small office that had been Robert's workspace, Agent Harper arrived with news from FBI headquarters. "Director Chun asked me to personally deliver this," she said, handing Olivia an official-looking document. "It's unprecedented, but so is this entire situation." The document formalized the status of the Bennett Center as a designated emergency response facility under joint community federal management. It provided substantial funding for expansion and upgrades, established Olivia as the official director with FBI liaison support, and created a framework for incorporating the center's innovations into national emergency response protocols. "Your uncle's vision is becoming official policy," Harper explained. "The centralized approach to emergency management is being reevaluated based on what happened here. Director Chun is calling it the Bennett Protocol, Distributed Response. Capabilities in rural communities nationwide." Olivia stared at the document, trying to process its implications. "This goes far beyond anything I imagined when we found this place." "That's how transformative change usually happens," Harper replied. "Not from grand strategies, but from someone solving an immediate problem so effectively that it reveals a better approach for everyone." The following day, conditions improved enough to allow limited surface movement. Initial assessment teams returned with sobering footage of Maplewood's devastation. Block after block of charred foundations where homes had stood. The elementary school reduced to structural steel and concrete pads. Main Street businesses identifiable only by melted signs and scorched inventory. Yet amid the destruction, patterns emerged that would guide recovery. The fire breaks and thermal barriers had protected key infrastructure: the water treatment plant, the medical clinic, the town's historic library. These would become anchors for rebuilding. More importantly, the human infrastructure remained intact. Every resident had survived, and the experience of sheltering together had forged connections across previous social divides. The banker and the janitor had worked side by side distributing supplies. The retired teacher had comforted the mayor's children while their mother coordinated emergency operations. The wealthy developer and the struggling single parent had shared resources and support. 1 week after the fire had reached Maplewood, the Bennett Center began transitioning from emergency shelter to recovery headquarters. As residents gradually relocated to temporary housing provided by state disaster relief, the bunker's systems were reconfigured to support rebuilding efforts, mapping damaged areas, coordinating resource distribution, and maintaining communication infrastructure while conventional systems were restored. Olivia found herself naturally assuming leadership of this phase as well, her structural engineering expertise proving invaluable in assessing building damage and planning reconstruction. What had begun as a desperate search for housing after foreclosure had evolved into a position where her professional skills were being utilized at their highest level. The governor's office called, Mayor Wilson informed her during one of their daily briefings. They want to incorporate the Bennett Center permanently into the state's emergency management network. They're offering funding to expand the facility and train personnel from other communities. What does that mean for ownership? Olivia asked, thinking of the inheritance that had changed their lives so dramatically. That's entirely up to you, the mayor assured her. They're proposing a partnership model where you maintain private ownership but receive public support for operations that benefit the broader community. It was the perfect solution, honoring Robert Bennett's vision of independent capability while acknowledging the public value of the resource he had created. That evening, as the recovery team finished their daily coordination meeting, Olivia and Zoe took a rare moment to walk the farm property together. The fire had scorched much of the surrounding land but had mysteriously spared the farmhouse, perhaps protected by the same microclimate effects that had made the fire so dangerous elsewhere, or perhaps simply by chance. Standing in what had once been an overgrown yard, now cleared by necessity and renewal, they looked toward Maplewood where reconstruction had already begun. The distant sounds of equipment and workers marked the community's first steps toward rebuilding. Do you ever think about how different things would be if we hadn't lost our house? Zoe asked, displaying the philosophical depth that continued to surprise Olivia. All the time, Olivia admitted. That foreclosure notice seemed like the worst thing that could happen to us. I felt like I'd failed you completely. Zoe shook her head firmly. You never failed me. You just hadn't found the right problem to solve yet. The wisdom in this observation struck Olivia deeply. Her daughter had articulated something profound, that perhaps her struggles had not been failures, but redirections toward where her skills were truly needed. The thing is, Zoe continued, we're not just fixing our own housing problem anymore. We're helping everyone have homes again. That's way better. Olivia put her arm around her daughter's shoulders, marveling at the perspective that allowed a 10-year-old to see opportunity in disaster and purpose in difficulty. You know what Uncle Robert wrote in his journal? She asked. That sometimes the universe puts exactly the right people in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. I think he was talking about us. As they walked back toward the silo that had transformed their lives and saved their community, Olivia reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 2 months. From the despair of foreclosure to leading a community's rebirth from devastating wildfire, a path no one could have predicted or planned. The Bennett Center would continue to evolve, becoming a model for a new approach to emergency management nationwide. Maplewood would rebuild, stronger and more united than before. And Olivia and Zoe had found not just a home, but a purpose that aligned perfectly with their unique abilities. The inheritance that had initially seemed like an old farmer's cruel joke, a dilapidated property with a strange silo, had revealed itself as something far more valuable than any conventional legacy. Robert Bennett had left them not just a facility but a mission, not just shelter but purpose. As they reached the silo entrance, Olivia paused to look at the unassuming structure. that concealed such extraordinary capacity beneath its ordinary exterior. Like the human potential for resilience and growth, its true value was invisible until circumstances revealed what had been there all along, waiting for the right moment and the right people to fulfill its purpose. Ready to help plan tomorrow's rebuilding assignments? She asked Zoe. Ready, her daughter confirmed with the confidence of someone who had discovered her place in the world. We've got a town to rebuild. And together they descended into the Bennett Center, not as desperate inheritors of an abandoned property, but as stewards of a legacy that would reshape how communities face disasters for generations to come. Want more incredible stories that will leave you inspired? Click one of the videos on your screen right now. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another extraordinary journey of resilience and hope. Remember to hit that notification bell, because our next story might just change how you see the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.